Bilawal, thank you so much for joining us today and on this important lecture for our ex-president, Lady Margaret Hall Benazir Bhutto. And it's a proud moment for me to be hosting this lecture in my term. You touched on very important points, and you just said that Benazir Bhutto once said that democracy is the best revenge of all. And you touched on the decline of democracy in Pakistan, which the world agrees with. Many institutions, including the European Union, saw the elections in 2024, criticized them for the allegation of political engineering, electoral manipulation and suppression. You highlighted well and accepted already that the military has been accused of exerting undue influence over Pakistan's political landscape. But there is also criticism that the Pakistan's People's Party, that Benazir Bhutto once stood for these values, has contributed to the weakening of democratic institutions, starting with the breaking of the Charter of Democracy that the Pakistan People's Party and the PMLN once pledged to, alongside the criticisms recently that you took a pivotal role in the 26th Amendment, that the judiciary has been more politicized, that the recent PICA laws, the Pakistan's Electronic Criminal Crime Act, was not really opposed. How do you respond to the criticism that you have contributed to the decline of democracy that once the Pakistan's People's Party fought for and stood for?
We say, well, the Pakistan People's Party has always and will always continue to fight for democracy, whether it is our constitution, the subsequent rights, devolution, individual rights, labor rights, agriculture workers' rights, minority rights, trans rights. Every piece of legislation, politics, rights-based politics, constitution-based politics is done, championed, and protected by the People's Party. Obviously, we welcome all criticism and we can always do better. But to say that we've contributed to the weakening of democracy in Pakistan, Pakistan's democracy is not the strongest at the moment, but we're not the only country facing this challenge. We're not a 200-year-old democracy or soon to be 300-year-old democracy like other countries who we've seen once challenged with populism and post-fact politics and post-shame politics and alternate reality politics. We've seen even well-founded institutions shake, well-established norms give way, and those challenges are there in Pakistan today. As far as the 26th Amendment or PICA or any of the other, every single one of them, I think Pakistan People's Party has had a positive contribution to. As far as the 26th Amendment, okay, perhaps it's not exactly as I would have drafted, but it was a long-standing aim of the very Charter of Democracy that you referred to, that we were going to establish a constitutional court. But it was because the People's Party believed in dialogue and engagement and compromise and not enforcing your view despite having the votes, that we engaged with the opposition, with Maulana Fazlur Rahman, and came out with a compromise legislation. Similarly, with the PICA amendment, you can say it's not strong enough criticism. It depends on your opinion or how much you oppose or support the law. But the People's Party, as far as a parliamentary force, has been the only political party to consistently oppose this legislation. When it was first brought in during Imran Khan's time, or in fact during Nawaz Sharif III, period Imran Khan, or period latest alteration, latest configuration that it's come out now, we've always engaged with the process and contributed through amendments and through our input to passing, which is not an ideal legislation, but a better legislation than initially proposed. Particularly those criticizing the current PICA amendment, I would draw their attention to the original proposition, original proposed legislation, which had ridiculous things like 30 years in prisons for a post of God knows what not. So that's how, at least for now, the People's Party and the current alignment of national politics, where we have the third largest number in the National Assembly. We may not be able to dictate our terms or impose our will on Parliament, but we do use our space to have a positive input, I believe. But what is that positive input for it to continue? There's a famous It sort of takes two to tango, or dono haath se tali bajta hai. And sirf People's Party ka haath maujood hai. Sorry, I'm speaking in a language that nobody's going to understand. So I said it takes two to tango, but at the moment, it's only the People's Party who's willing to do that tango. If you look at our friends who sit on the government benches, they're not particularly inclined to further democratic space, constitutional space, the issue of human rights. And our friends who are sitting on the opposition, their track record is there for all to see. But even today, while according to them, they face the brunt of all this political repression and engineering, etc., they too are not willing to have a meaningful, rights-based, democracy-based, normative-based, institutional building-based conversation. And until we move away from that politics, we're stuck in the rut that we are now.
You touched on very important points here. I think there's a lot to unpack, and I'll try my best as we move on. But one important issue, you talked about political victimization. Your party, not here but in your speech, your party has been the receiving end of political victimization, state institutions used against, whether we saw in the Zulfikar Ali Bhutto, Shahid Mohtarma Bhutto, and continue on. One of the we have recently seen is the Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf facing the same, with Imran Khan incarcerated, the political activists being constantly put in jail, and more importantly, their supporters accuse current regime, and also they point towards the Pakistan People's Party as well to have been involved in not strongly opposing for the democratic principles, no matter how you disagree, for the democratic principle, and especially on the point of human rights. How do you respond to those criticisms, especially given that the same political tools are now used against them that were once used against the Pakistan People's Party and also PMLN?
I think it's a funny and kind of sad, because absolutely, they've not only been used against the People's Party, they were founded to be used against the People's Party. Political victimization in Pakistan, which was called accountability, when either of these other parties are in power, was targeted at the People's Party. The reason these institutions were set up was to undo the electoral chances of the People's Party. And I'm not talking about, long forgotten history of Zulfikar Ali Bhutto or Benazir Bhutto. I'm talking about 2018, when Imran Khan was Prime Minister. In fact, as far as political victimization in Pakistan is concerned, or political engineering in Pakistan is concerned, lawfare and the weaponization of the judiciary is concerned, that has been a constant fact of Pakistani politics. No matter who has been Prime Minister or who has been in opposition, up until Benazir Bhutto was elected Prime Minister in 1988, and she freed all political prisoners in Pakistan, restored the freedom of the press, etc. And when my father was elected for the first time as President of Pakistan in 2008 till 2013, and we were proud to say that Pakistan in that time did not have a single political prisoner. We didn't rely on political victimization. Those of us who are a student of history and politics will understand what a significant achievement it is for any body politic who has experienced this from 1947 up until 2008. That's just the way it works in Pakistan. And then, because of our Charter of Democracy, we managed to set up some norms, some democratic norms. Well, actually, you could disagree with each other, and it didn't mean you had to send each other to prison. We respected having differing opinions, and that was the space in which Pakistani democracy functioned without these tools. Obviously, that was roundly criticized by Mr. Khan. He then came into power, undid those norms, undid all the reforms that we had done to the National Accountability Bureau and all other institutions used to this end. In fact, he changed the prison manual So there's prison, there's A class, B class, C class, and if you've got a degree, you get a certain class, and if you were, because half of the politicians were in prison, so if you're a politician, you're also entitled to that class. And my father who spent a total of 14 years of his political life as a political prisoner in Pakistan without a conviction, was imprisoned anew under Mr. Khan's when he was Prime Minister. It's fair enough, everybody does it, I don't hold it against him. But he refused to even allow us a cooling box to keep my father's insulin in, because he's a diabetic. He was personally involved from the Prime Minister's office in ensuring not only that my father's sister was arrested on Eid night from the hospital bed, that Mr. Sharif's daughter was arrested. But I used to say at the time that he should pray that it's a Pakistan People's Party government that comes in next. Because we're the only ones, who say democracy is the best revenge. And despite the fact that you've tortured us, thrown us into prison, killed us workers, we won't do the same to you. Nobody else is like that. And what he's facing today is not just accidentally of his making. He's literally ripped up the change manual. Now he gets access to a exercise bike and other things from the courts that people didn't in his time. I would like to see a world where actually nobody goes to prison. And we get to do our politics and agree to disagree and go to our parliament like you guys debate here at the chamber. But it will require somebody else other than the Pakistan People's Party to take that stance.
But as we stand today, does the Pakistan People's Party and yourself oppose the victimization of the Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf and their Imran Khan?
We have constantly opposed the National Accountability Bureau, the institution used to investigate corruption in Pakistan, first deployed by Mr. Sharif and then Mr. Khan. We oppose the National Accountability Bureau today. We believe that these are draconian. The laws that they use to do accountability aren't effective in that means, but we believe in meaningful reform. I don't believe that Mr. Khan is opposed to political victimization. He's in favor of political victimization, he just doesn't want it to happen to him. I'm opposed to political victimization, full stop. I don't care that it happens to me because it has been happening to me and it will continue to happen within Pakistan. It's new for Mr. Khan. It's new for Mr. Khan because for 30 years he was built up in Pakistani politics by the very military establishment that he criticizes today. He was in favor of the political victimization by Pervez Musharraf. He was in favor of political victimization when Nawaz Sharif won. And he's only not in favor of it when it comes to him.
So moving on along victimization, another sector that is under threat is media freedom and press and free speech. We have seen that journalists being intimidated, abducted. A recent Human Rights Commission report highlights a worsening media climate since the ousting of the former Prime Minister Imran Khan in April 2022. The Human Rights Commission has reported the increasing use of the term software update. UPMism reported they used to describe the abduction, interrogation, and coerced compliance of journalists and activists. And we spoke about PICA being one of those. And what role can the Pakistan's People Party play in this climate to advocate for a Pakistan where there is more press freedom and the right to free speech, especially in light of social media where young people want to voice and channel their voices to social media and they're being suppressed?
So I have a couple of thoughts on this. First of all, as far as Pakistan's free press journey has been concerned, you can compare each and every one of the Pakistan People's Party ruled terms in power now. It's a part of history to Mr. Khan's term or Mr. Sharif's term, and we stand out. Just as we don't have political prisoners, we didn't really care what the media said about us. They're sitting right there. They didn't say very nice things, but they had the freedom to say it. We have moved away from that as a society. And there's this urge to control not only sort of the formal media, but the informal media, that's getting a little bit draconian, claustrophobic. But I think that there's the like sort of big D argument that obviously free press is important for every democratic society and etc. But there's also just the average citizen who's not political. They say our youth is politicized. A fraction of our youth is politicized. A majority of us are not so political. When you engage in political speech, you should have free speech. That's obviously restricted. What is happening now? And I think partly there's a generational disconnect where sort of the boomers in Islamabad don't quite get social media or how the digital age works. And what's happening is, as I said in my speech, of 60%, 65% of our population are under the age of 35, and you suddenly take 65% of your population's access to WhatsApp away, slow down their Netflix streaming or mess up their, I don't know, whatever else they're on. You're suddenly antagonizing 65% of your population. It stifles creativity. It stifles economic activity. So what we as the People's Party are focused at the moment is we want to apply a rights-based approach. And I'm actually currently campaigning for a digital bill of rights for Pakistan that would recognize access to internet, even protections from misinformation and all those other things, protections for your data, and a specific legislation that highlights exactly and protects exactly at least the certain fundamentals of the digital space that we're now increasingly engaged in. Is it going to fix everything? I don't think so, but I think we need to move away from the current I have a problem, how do I control it approach through a more rights-based approach. That'll hopefully improve things a little bit. Ultimately, we just have to move away from this desire to control everything. The desire to control everyone's opinion, the desire to control everyone's tweet, the desire to control every headline. You can't conquer the media. You certainly can't conquer the digital media. So that is something that that is the software update that we need in Islam.
And I hope that the software update does come in literal sense. There are challenges, and you're right, that we need to allow people with the freedom of press, with free speech. Control doesn't work. However, there's always blame that political participation comes at the heart of it when certain forces want to bring these laws, because in the parliament, who sits are political representatives. Would you support a parliamentary commission to investigate then media suppression and state-based intimidation and to find out what can be done in order to reverse these?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, wonderful. And then I want to move on to then, I think more specifically to Sindh and Balochistan. The Pakistan's People Party struggled to maintain a strong political foothold beyond Sindh and Balochistan, and I suppose there's a desire to expand to the national level. But I think it will all also depends on what their role or how their activities have been, performances in Sindh and Balochistan. So, for instance, between 1998 and 2023, Sindh and Balochistan were the only provinces where the share of out-of-school children increased. Sindh accounted for 25% of the national out-of-school population in 1998, a figure that has since risen to 31% in 2023. In healthcare, some progress has been made in expanding access and maternal jobs, but mortality rates in Sindh remain higher than those in Punjab and Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. So despite ruling Sindh for more than a decade and also being in Balochistan, why has the Pakistan's People's Party governance failed to address these crises?
Thank you so much for your question. I think it's really good to have an opportunity to engage in subtopics. First, I think it's laughable to say that healthcare is only slightly improved in the province of Sindh. Since the Pakistan People's Party took over in 2008 up until today, we've improved access to not only to the standard of healthcare, to the quality of healthcare, but we've also ensured it's free at the point of contact for all citizens. We've taken, one example is what used to be the national NICVD, the National Cardiovascular Hospital in Karachi, and before devolution was a federal program that ran on donations. And we've built it into a formidable institution that is now the largest network of cardiac healthcare on the planet, that provides free of cost healthcare. I mean, you have a heart attack, you can get free treatment at a hospital in every district of the province of Sindh. When we took over, there was nowhere to get a kidney transplant or a liver transplant in the province. Actually, in the country, you'd have to go to India. Now in Khairpur, in Gambhar, which is in the northern area of Sindh, you get free liver transplant, free kidney transplant, free a whole host of other tertiary care facilities, and not only Pakistanis from all over Pakistan, we even have international patients coming to our Karachi hospital and our government hospital to get their treatment. We've done the same with children's emergency care across the province. We're under our partnership with the Child Life Foundation. We've made access to children emergency care a priority. As far as the infant mortality rate is concerned, maternal mortality rate and infant mortality rate was not only the highest in Sindh, increasing the highest in Sindh up until 2013 when it's been on the decline. Fastest rate of decline is in Sindh, specifically as a result not only of the stuff you saw in Thar, but our various mother and child support programs. So now we actually outcompete all the other provinces, having originally come from a position where our infant mortality and our infant mortality and maternal mortality rate was higher than the rest. And we still aspire to provide free and healthcare of international standards to the people of our province. That's not to say that we're fantastic, but by any measurement compared to any other government in our country or in our region on the healthcare front, we've been extremely successful. On education, even though we've drastically increased our spending on education from 2008 till 2000, well, now, the place where there's been a decrease in spending has been from the federal level that is completely cut off their support for the education sector, particularly, I mean, I know we'll talk about it, but for universities. And while the province of Sindh is the only one, the Chief Minister is sitting right there, to step in and fill that gap that was left behind by the federal government, other provinces, including KP and Punjab, don't do the same, which is why actually you have a crisis today at universities all across the countries. I wish actually we had a performance election, but don't seem to be moving in that direction.
So I also want to touch in there on Balochistan. I'm from Balochistan.
Yeah.
You have current government in Balochistan.
Yeah.
Last time you were here in 2010 to 2013. There is political instability and crackdown on political dissent, and it has been rising. And there are serious concerns, especially with the Baloch Yakjati Committee and other right groups report an increase in enforced disappearance, suppression of peaceful activism. Additionally, allegations of electoral manipulation have fueled protests by Baloch and Pashtun nationalist parties as well as religious groups. Given these challenges, how does the Pakistan People Party plan to rebuild the national support base, and how do you respond to the criticism that your party faces in Balochistan as to what's happening in terms of the crackdown?
Absolutely. I think the concerns are very legitimate, and the situation right now, not necessarily to do more with political stability. Balochistan, of all things, has been the more politically stable province of the rest, but security challenges, absolutely. And you'll be more aware about how pervasive the security threat in Balochistan has been and increasingly how it's getting worse. And unfortunately, what we've seen in Pakistan and what we've seen across the world is wherever there's a particularly acute security challenge, it creates space for, fair enough, legitimate counter-terrorist operations, but also within the mix of those legitimate counter-terrorist operations, you have a whole host of human rights abuses, etc., that are going on, have been going on, and Balochistan in particular has been on a slow boil for the longest time, so that it's particularly more acute there. I am proud of the work that the Pakistan People's Party has done in Balochistan in the past. I believe that we have delivered again. I'm not saying necessarily that we got the credit or it's appreciated or understood, but the achievements of the Pakistan People's Party as far as devolution is concerned, the new NFC award is concerned, Ghazi Hukuk-e-Balochistan is concerned, and a whole host of transformative changes that, fair enough, were in some cases followed through, in most cases were not followed through, are not only historic achievements. There is something that the great nationalist people have taken up over after us, or the great federalist people who've taken over after us, or even the great Khan who took over after us. Not one of them even scratch the surface as far as those transformative revolutionary changes are concerned. Obviously, those have to be taken forward. We don't. I was going to say we don't have the climate for that in Balochistan at the moment. We don't have the climate for that in Pakistan at the moment.
And how do you see the solution to Balochistan crisis? What do you think the military, the political parties should do to take Balochistan on a path that is part of the larger Pakistan's consensus?
Well, I think that what used to be confined as a Balochistan crisis is now a Pakistan crisis. And in fact, it's not even a Pakistan crisis, it's an international crisis. I used to think, when we were going through, back to the topic, through the 90s and sort of my mother's struggle with democracy and controlled democracy at the time, that eventually democracy wins, right? The good guys win at the end of the day. So Pakistan was meant to become more like other great democracies of the world. Like the United States, the United Kingdom. It turns out the rest of the world is becoming a little bit more like us. And so, how do you solve the Balochistan crisis, the Pakistan crisis? Is it a democracy crisis? We've lost, I think politicians everywhere need to understand that the reason that the populace has no solutions and aren't actually dealing with the general issues are cutting across those who claim to represent those real issues is there is a massive disconnect. I have my own theories for the disconnect in Pakistan, and there's a disconnect in the rest of the world between the population and those in power. In Pakistan, I believe that a large part of it is a demographic disconnect. We have 60, 70, 80-year-olds taking all the decisions at every policy forum, at every institutional forum. And 65% of the population is under the age of 35. You don't understand where they're thinking, you're thinking 5 years, they're thinking 30 years. And you see that discrepancy then in your climate policy, in your education policy, in your health policy, in your CT policy, in your digital policy.
I mean, you're a young leader, but how do you create a space for youth in Pakistan?
Fair enough. Okay, fine. I'm young and I wouldn't at least pretend to be able to connect on everything with everyone. But I do find myself in rooms and cabinet or in parliament or in meetings and spaces where I'm just talking to people from another world. I mean, I don't know how to convey, especially a lot of this digital stuff, especially the sort of this idea behind like a great firewall. Okay, so on like I ideally don't Like, we don't want a firewall. But if you're going to put up a firewall, then it, like, a la the China firewall and give us, like, the great Pakistani firewall, then at least give us the digital infrastructure that China gives its citizens before it does all that control. When you make your economic policy and you're saying that way, aiming to make Pakistan a IT sector $1 trillion, and you shut off your infrastructure.
So how do
when
you
make...
I want to push on one thing there. How do you create space for youth in the current environment? The current Prime Minister has the youth programs and a lot of youth initiatives trying to. So is that the way, or is there a better way to create space, especially on the political or the tables, on the stakeholder tables?
Of course, opportunity as far as economic opportunity, whether it's the youth program or any of the other programs, those are all good things. But until you're willing to have not only a seat at the table, and let's break this down. It's not only a seat at the table in Parliament where you have very few. You're fair enough, there's me, what am I going to do alone? There's a couple of other people. The other people that are considered youth are grandparents themselves. But forget fair enough, right? So Parliament apparently, not our domain. Surely university is your domain, right? At the universities in Pakistan, the students are not allowed to unionize. But the teachers are allowed to unionize. The clerks are allowed to unionize. The staff is allowed to unionize. The only people that you don't want to listen to an opinion from are the students that the university is meant to be teaching. So you see this reflected at all levels in Pakistani society, and maybe it passed in the past, where younger people are expected to be in their place and do what they're told. But now the youth are majority, not a minority of our population anymore. Either you meet their aspirations, which are normal aspirations that allow the youth all over the world, which is employment, which is education, which is creating those opportunities, or you're going to see the discontent that you see manifest today, either in urban middle class, like uppity parties, or the more rights-based separatist nationalist-leaning groups, or whatever. It's going to manifest in various ways, until you get a seat at the table everywhere from your university back to the Houses of Parliament.
I'm conscious of the time, and I want to...
And of the fact there's no heating in here,
it's cold
and I'm from the desert.
I imagine it's cold here as well, and you're not climatized yet, but I do want to touch on one final question on the foreign policy. Given that you were the former foreign minister of Pakistan, you touch on the international arena as democracy is going in a different direction as well. The United States has recently imposed sanctions on 4 Pakistani entities linked to the missiles development. The government has condemned these sanctions as biased. First, how do you see this as an indication of worsening US-Pakistan relationship? And more importantly, given Pakistan's relationship with China, should Pakistan decisively align with China, or can it still maintain the balanced approach?
As far as the sanctions are concerned, for the US, the sanctions are like candy. They hand them out to everybody. And yeah, it's concerning that Pakistan's missile program has recently been sanctioned by the United States. The government is obviously engaged with conversations with them. But I'm really sort of, on this whole nuclear weapons, missiles, just weaponry by and large, I'm really sort of struck at the hypocrisy of the world. Like, what's the rule? What are the rules that allow you to be entitled to a nuclear weapon and not entitled to a nuclear weapon? What are the rules that entitle you to a missile and not entitle you to a missile? Like, every American's right to bear arms is entitled. Is it like in that way every Western country or every white country are allowed nuclear weapons or weapons at large and the rest of us aren't? Pakistan's nuclear weapon is not an aggressive nuclear weapon. We do not seek to build a Riviera anywhere or occupy any Greenland. Okay? We don't have an expansionist foreign policy to take over the Panama Canal or conquer Canada. Our nukes are only for our self-defense. They were made after India made their weapons. They were tested after India tested their weapons. Unlike India, we haven't accidentally shot a nuclear-armed ballistic missile into our neighbor's territory and said, Oops. And you're right, we are sanctioned. So I feel that all Pakistanis are of the view that our nuclear capability, when all the strings that come attached with that, is part of our self-defense. If there was even a leeway or a sliver of doubt, go ask Zelensky how he feels now that Ukraine lost their nuclear weapons. The level of hypocrisy, particularly from the United States in their world policing these days, makes one want to take these sanctions with a little bit of a pinch of salt, but obviously you can't. They're a serious challenge to Pakistan's national security. I think we're in a safe place to say that whatever our capacity is today, we'll jealously guard. And as far as future capacity is concerned, fair enough, that can be open to a diplomatic conversation. But a broader conversation needs to happen, like who has the right to defend themselves? Are we going to watch as the international community turns India into the net security provider of the region, as they pummel billions of dollars in arms sales to India? Are we just going to sit on our hands and wait for us to become Ukraine? I don't think so. So we're going to jealously guard our nuclear weapons, our ballistic weapon program. I'm glad you asked the question, and keep an eye out in case they try and make us the next WMDs. We do have nukes. We have the missiles. No one, I think, that's that. But as far as these sanctions are concerned, I think there are more productive ways to engage in this conversation. A proper international rules-based order that accounts for all of these things, I think, are what is in Pakistan's interest and everybody else's interest.
Well, Bilawal, this is all the time we had today. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Absolute privilege.
Sorry, I was like...